Hello everyone, today you are going to learn how to start a worm farm. I don't know if you're watching this because you bought our worm farm kit or if you just stumbled upon it on YouTube. Either way, you're going to learn and you're going to like it. It's a pretty straightforward process. We're actually going to show you two ways to start a worm farm today. One very proactive, the other one very hands-off, and you just let time do the work for you. This is the first method. This revolves around this blue bin here, which contains 100 adult redworms, and it takes a considerable amount of legwork, and I'll show you what I mean in a few seconds. So what you're going to need for this is a 1 square foot bin. You could use a bin of any color. I just like blue. You're going to need your 100 adult redworms, and you are going to need 2 inches worth of pure manure. Now, if you don't have access to manure, you could use a peat moss and paper mix, but I must caution you that paper and cardboard bedding is not what it used to be. And by that I mean that prior to, I think it was 1997, cardboard and paper, or the glues in cardboard and paper were based from animal bone marrow, which means that essentially there was protein, there was meat in them. And after 1997, they moved to, I think it was a soy-based or vegetable-based glue. It doesn't have the same nutritional content for the worms as the meat-based glue did. So really, it's just like feeding them fiber. It's not going to do anything for them, so you're going to have to do supplemental feedings of either rabbit feed, chicken feed, or you could use hogs feed. And if you don't have access to any of those, we sell our own worm feed on our site: Amazon, eBay, Walmart, Jet.com, etc., etc., etc. So you could use that for your supplemental feeding. So you could either use 100% manure, get 2 inches of it, use peat moss and paper with weekly feedings of just a light dusting of the worm feed. So what you have to do after you put your worms in, you put the bedding in, you let this sit for a month. So you let this sit for 30 days. You're going to want to cover it. You definitely want to cover it. Just use some old plastic or some old bags you have laying around the house. No big deal. That's just so that the moisture doesn't escape. And then, you could check on it. You're going to have to check on it every week or so. Make sure that the moisture content is good and that your worms aren't flooding. They're not too dry. But what's going to happen is that you're going to start to see these little green orbs. And these orbs are your worm cocoons. Each one of these contain anywhere from 1 to 7 worms. So this one bin has been going for about a week now, and you're looking at 1 to 2 cocoons per week per worm. So that means that as of now, there's a max of 200 cocoons in here for the 1 week, and that's under optimal conditions. And should all of those cocoons hatch, it would be just about 1,400 worms if they all contain 7 worms each. Now, like I said, that's definitely optimum conditions, and that's the best case scenario. It's very rare that you're going to get a 100% hatching rate. You're probably going to get somewhere around a 50% hatching rate, especially if you're new to this on your first try and you're not familiar with the conditions and the proper conditions. But either way, this 100 worms by the end of the month will probably end up with around 500 to 700 worms, which is pretty good considering you started with $4 worth of worms. So you take this bin after 1 month and you're going to bring it over to your harvesting table. Now, this is just going to be a very quick tutorial. We have another video that shows you how to harvest your worms. It's linked below, and you could also find it on our site. So what you're going to do is that you're going to want to dump this bin out onto your harvesting table, and I already have one going here. You could watch the other video to see how we harvest them. You're going to remove the castings from the worms, and these castings are going to contain your worm cocoons. So the worms will dig down. You're going to be left with a ball of pure worms, which you're going to put back in your breeding container so that they could breed for another cycle. Right now, we're going to take our worm castings with all the worm cocoons and all the worm eggs, and we're going to set them aside into a new bin. Don't worry if you get a few worms in there. It happens. They don't eat their cocoons or anything, so you're not going to panic. I would advise getting a larger bin for your hatching box. I could fit 5 of these, so that's why you only need a little bit of bedding. You only need 2 inches of bedding in the blue box, because in this one you could fit 5 of the blue box. So I could fit the castings and cocoons of 5 of these breeding boxes in this one bin. Now, because we're us and we sell a lot of worms, we had to organize it into a wall. You know, we could just pull them out, and it's easy to feed and check on them. But you're going to put them into your whatever you have. You can leave them on the floor if you want to, but you're going to have to cover it, just like you did the other one. We need to cover it to make sure that the moisture does not escape. And these need to stay at a temperature of 60 to 70 degrees, preferably 70 degrees. And that's because in the early spring, we have what's called the swarm, where all of the eggs hatch. That's what happens in nature. So when the temperature goes from cold to hot, the worms instinctually hatch. We need to replicate those conditions in captivity, so to speak. So these, you can't see it here, but there's a heater running behind all of these drawers, like a greenhouse heater, that keeps them all warm. And we're going to say, I haven't checked on these yet, but they should have hatched by now. We've been feeding them some vegetable waste and some kitchen compost. Eggshells are great. They love them. And yep, here they are. Here's the worms that, oh wow, they got big. That hatched out of a few of those blue boxes. You got quite a few large ones. They once it gets warmer, and I'm shooting this video in the spring, once it gets warmer, they grow very fast. So there's easily 1,000 worms in here. No, there's more than that. There's tons of babies. So what you could do after this is that you could take your larger worms like this, your larger banded adult worms, and you could start a new breeding bin. So instead of just having 1, you'll have 2, or maybe, 3 or 4, depending on how many worms you get out of this first hatching. You could just keep on that process, create more hatching bins, create more, egg-laying bins, and eventually you're just going to have a wall full of worms and hatching bins, and you're going to have hundreds of thousands of worms. And you'll probably then be able to run me out of business because you could probably sell them cheaper than I can with all my overhead. So that's method 1. It's pretty straightforward. It's going to take some getting used to, but it's definitely worth it if you want fast production and if you want to see population tripling and quadrupling within the span of 2 months. This is how you're going to want to do it. Now, if you are just a hobby composter and you're very hands-off and you're just buying these worms because next year you want to be able to create worm castings, or even if you just want to create worm castings, you don't want to create worms, this is the way to do it. So this bin, this is a multiplication bin, and it's, as you can see, it's several feet tall, several feet high, but several feet of bedding in it. This multiplication bin started with the same 2 inches of manure bedding at the bottom. And except we added more worms because of the square footage of this bin. We actually added 1,000 worms instead of 100. The larger the bin, the more worms you're going to want to add, because you want the worms to bump into each other. That way they can make worm babies, get married, and live happy lives. But yeah, we started this with 2 inches of bedding. This has actually been sitting for a year. This is a year's worth of feeding. So we're going to do the same thing. Every week we're going to check on them, and if they ate all the food, we're going to add more manure, add more food, add more compost, add more whatever they may be. We're still going to do supplemental feedings on these. And eventually, the bin's going to fill up, and you're going to have a bunch of happy worms, a bunch of babies, and but nature does the work with this one. Everything coexists. So as you can see, we have a lot of small, tiny baby worms. We have cocoons in here. We have all sorts of stuff. So if your main concern is just worm casting production, gardening, and you don't want to multiply them fast, and you just want to let nature take its course, or more importantly, if you don't feel like cleaning out worm bins every 30 days and making a big hoopla out of it, just do this. 2 inches of bedding, 1,000 worms, and after a year, you'll have all of these worm castings. There's got to be 2, 3. There's plenty of worm castings in here, and all you need is 2 inches worth of worm castings, and that's 2 inches going this way. A small handful of worm castings will support a 6-inch plant for several months. That's all you need per plant. That's how rich worm castings are. So this is going to be more than enough for a decent-sized garden spread where you could rake it out, mix it into your soil. It's well worth it. I have another bin down here, which is the same thing. Another multiplication bin, a mix of baby worms, adult worms. I actually wonder if we could find some worms breeding in here. That would be very interesting. Up there there are some cocoons you could see mixed in here. And like I said, this is the multiplication bin setup. The much easier multiplication bin setup, and we're going to feed these the same exact way as we feed our other worm bins. I'm just trying to see if we could find some breeding worms. I don't know if I could get arrested for showing worms breeding on camera. I might, but if you don't call the police, then, well, it'll be our secret. We really don't have to say anything. Oh yes, I found some! Here we go. That is what 2 breeding red worms look like. It is disgusting. And the first time I saw them doing that, I thought that I had like some kind of hybrid morph worm. I thought they were dying. For a second, I thought I was going to be a millionaire, and then I was mortified. I thought it was an alien worm. It was really bad. But that's what worms look like when they breed. So they get all twisted up and knotted up like that. They're making babies. And if your kids are in the room, the worms just got married. Tell them congratulations, happy. And then that's when you get worm castings like this. I found that no matter what the setup is, the larger setup with the multiplication bin, the hands-off approach, or the egg-laying bin, what matters is your bedding and your moisture content. It doesn't matter how you do it. The worms are going to reproduce at the same rate in the small bin or in the big bin with the same bedding and with the same moisture. What's going to matter to you and what's going to be your deciding factor is how quickly do you want the worms to multiply. Because here, they might be a little slower. The rate will be the same, but the worm size will be different. They might not grow out as quickly, but the population will be the same, so you still have a lot of baby worms. In this one, because there's less in each bin, they're going to get bigger. As you can see, this bin's only been sitting here for a month, and we already have some full-grown adults. But you could take these, you could sell them, you could do whatever. It's because when you grow them out, you know the age of the worms. So you know that these are adults. They're juveniles. You could use them for different things. Oh, they're adults. We could use them for fishing. They're juveniles. We could use them for composting. It's just a total mix. You have no idea what you're going to get. But like I said, it all depends on the application. So I hope that this very brief walkthrough was helpful to you. And if it was, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, that whole long spiel that everybody on YouTube hates. But what's really important is that if you have any questions, contact us at www.cheapwormsforsale.com. Our email and phone number is listed there, as well as a slew of other videos that you could use to learn how to worm farm and hopefully make yourself some money while you're doing it. My name is Ken, and thank you for stopping in.